I'm Aira Brown. My birthday is June 19th, 2009. I live in Ashland, Virginia, and I'm 4 foot tall.
From the outside, Aira Marie Brown seemed like a living fairy tale. With porcelain skin, impossibly wide blue eyes, and delicate features that earned her the nickname, the real-life doll. She became an internet sensation before she could even form full sentences. At just 2 years old, modeling agencies, tabloids, and fashion scouts thrust her into a spotlight most adults would struggle to handle. But behind the perfect photos and viral headlines was a childhood slipping away piece by piece. What began as fascination with a little girl's unusual beauty soon hardened into pressure, expectation, and loss, leaving Aira with a life that no longer resembled the glossy fairy tale sold to millions. This is the tragic story of the girl who looked like a doll. The viral beginning. Aira Marie Brown was born into an ordinary household, but even in her earliest days, people noticed there was something extraordinary about her. Neighbors would pause when they saw her in a stroller, remarking on her porcelain skin and eyes that seemed impossibly wide for such a small child. Strangers leaned down to take a second look, praising her doll-like appearance. For her parents, it was flattering, but at first, it was nothing more than a novelty of childhood. Her mother often enjoyed dressing her up in carefully chosen outfits. Tiny bows, lace-trimmed dresses, and soft pastel cardigans seemed to enhance the natural features that drew attention. One afternoon, when Aira was barely 2 years old, her parents arranged a small photo session at home. They wanted to capture the fleeting charm of their daughter's toddler, years before time rushed on. The pictures, taken under the gentle light of the living room window, would become the first step toward an unexpected journey. When those photographs made their way online through family and friends, they drew responses far beyond what her parents expected. Relatives marveled at how perfectly she seemed to pose, even without trying. Others commented that she had the kind of look usually reserved for fashion magazines. Encouraged, her parents decided to explore whether Aira's unique appearance might open doors in children's modeling. Their search led them to a local talent agency that specialized in young models. At the initial meeting, Aira was shy but cooperative, curious about the cameras and bright lights in the studio. The agency representatives saw something immediately. Her ability to sit still, her expressive eyes, and the natural way she carried herself made her stand out. While most toddlers struggled with attention spans, Aira seemed unusually calm in front of the camera. The agency signed her without hesitation. Her first official photo shoot was for a children's clothing brand. The studio buzzed with stylists, photographers, and assistants, all surprised by how easily she adapted to the new environment. She giggled when they adjusted her hair, smiled when prompted, and showed none of the restlessness that many children her age would. The finished photographs captured more than just clothing. They conveyed a sense of charm that clients quickly recognized. One opportunity led to another. Invitations came for catalog shoots, promotional campaigns, and small runway shows designed for children's fashion. Aira began to travel with her parents, meeting designers and photographers who admired her natural presence. Each experience added to her growing familiarity with the world of modeling. Though she was still very young, she learned how to sit patiently during preparations, how to walk when guided on a miniature runway, and how to respond to the click of a camera with confidence. Aira was barely 2 years old, and yet she was already working part-time. What was once just a beautiful baby girl was turning into a household name every family would soon recognize. Doll Girl. The birth of the doll girl. As Aira's presence in the modeling world grew, it was her parents who became the architects of her young career. They were not industry veterans, but they quickly learned the rhythms of castings, bookings, and contracts. At home, her mother meticulously organized schedules, arranged outfits, and managed correspondence with agencies. Her father often handled travel and logistics, ensuring that their daughter arrived where she needed to be, ready to perform. From the outside, it seemed like a family adventure. Aira was never left to navigate these unfamiliar spaces alone. At photo shoots, her mother was always nearby, smoothing down her hair or encouraging her with gentle nods. At auditions, her father reassured her when the rooms grew crowded. Together, they presented themselves as protectors, determined to keep Aira comfortable, even as her world expanded. Yet, they also understood the opportunity that had appeared almost overnight. When industry professionals referred to Aira as the doll girl, her parents did not shy away from the label. They embraced it, seeing in the phrase a brand that could distinguish her from hundreds of other child models. The nickname began to appear in press write-ups, and eventually, it became inseparable from her public identity. She was not simply Aira Marie Brown anymore. She was the girl who looked like a doll. That title carried power. Designers invited her to showcase their children's collections, knowing her look would draw attention. Brands requested her specifically for catalog covers, certain that her image would appeal to customers. Even small runway events became brighter with her presence, as audiences marveled at the uncanny charm of a child who seemed to blur the line between reality and fantasy. At home, her life adjusted around this growing recognition. Aira was homeschooled for much of her early education, allowing her family to balance academic needs with travel and bookings. While her peers gathered in classrooms, she often studied at hotel desks between rehearsals, or in quiet corners of studios, while waiting for her turn on set. Her parents believed this flexibility was necessary, a sacrifice worth making in exchange for the opportunities modeling offered. Public recognition came soon after. Articles and online features declared her one of the most beautiful children in the world. Commentators praised her rare features, likening her to a living porcelain doll. She was celebrated in a way few children ever are, her name becoming known beyond the circles of fashion and into broader conversations about beauty and childhood. To the outside world, it seemed like a dream. Aira's parents had succeeded in guiding their daughter into a space where she could shine, where her image was admired and sought after. For them, the sacrifices of time and normalcy seemed worthwhile. For Aira, the world of modeling had already become her reality. The girl who once played quietly in a living room had now stepped fully into the role that society had crafted for her, the doll brought to life. Fading fame and changing appearance. For much of her childhood, Aira had known only one rhythm of life. Photoshoots, fittings, and the excitement of flashing cameras were her normal. Each week seemed to bring something new, whether it was a catalog cover, a magazine spread, or a runway show. She had become accustomed to the routine, to the idea that she would always have another gig waiting just around the corner. But as she moved into adolescence, the rhythm began to change. At first, she did not notice. A photo shoot was postponed. Then another casting call ended without a callback. These seemed like small interruptions, temporary delays that would pass with time. Aira still prepared as she always had, practicing her poses, studying her portfolio, and staying ready for the next opportunity. Months went by, and the bookings slowed further. The phone that once rang with regularity grew quiet. Aira found herself waiting longer between jobs, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. She still walked into studios with the same bright eyes and careful posture, but the excitement that had once surrounded her seemed to fade. Fewer photographers asked for her by name, and fewer invitations arrived in the mail. The confusion was difficult to understand. For years, the world had praised her appearance, telling her she was special, unique, even magical. She had believed those words, not out of pride, but because they were all she had ever known. Now, as opportunities slipped away, she struggled to reconcile the silence with the image she had grown up with. Aira often sat in her room, paging through old photographs from her modeling days. She lingered on images of herself in elegant dresses, smiling at the camera with an ease that seemed almost unthinking. Those pictures reminded her of how natural it had all felt, how certain she had been that modeling was her path. Looking at them now, she wondered if that certainty had been misplaced. She shared her feelings in a rare moment of honesty, saying quietly to a friend, "I feel broken." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of her uncertainty. Modeling had been the language through which she understood herself, the framework around which her life had been built. Without it, she felt adrift, unsure of who she was or what she should do next. The absence of work left her with time she had never experienced before, time to reflect, to wonder, and to dream about what her future might hold. She was still young, still filled with possibility, but for the first time, she faced the reality of not knowing what came next. The girl who looked like a doll was learning that even the most carefully built identities could change, leaving her with the challenge of discovering who she truly was beyond the camera's gaze. The burden of beauty. As the years passed, the sparkle of Aira's modeling days faded completely. At first, Aira did not fully understand why the photographers and agencies no longer seemed interested in her. She had grown accustomed to being the child everyone adored, the one people described as a real-life doll. Now she found herself staring at the phone, waiting for opportunities that no longer came. It was not until she grew older that Aira fully understood why the attention had vanished. Her fame had never been about her as a person, but about her doll-like appearance. The wide blue eyes, porcelain skin, and childlike charm that captivated so many were the true reason behind her success. With adolescence, those features naturally changed, and the industry that had once celebrated her beauty no longer had a place for her. Gone were the two wide eyes that used to take up most of her chubby face. In their place now were equally bright, beautiful eyes that complemented her looks, but didn't overtake them. Gone were the puffy cheeks as well, replaced by a slimmer jawline that perfectly matched her figure, but didn't make her look like a doll anymore. For the first time, Aira realized she had been admired for something she never chose and could never keep. She had been an exceptionally beautiful child, but now she was just another pretty young girl. The transition was painful. Aira began to read about herself in tabloids and blogs, and the coverage was far from kind. Writers often reminded the world of the living doll who had once charmed modeling agencies, only to fade away as she grew older. Some articles bluntly emphasized that her fame was never her own, but merely a reflection of a fleeting image. These words struck Aira deeply, confirming what she had feared but struggled to admit. She was not valued for her personality, her intelligence, or her talents. She was remembered only for how she once looked. Her parents' influence during those early years now felt like a shadow she could not escape. They had pushed her toward fame, believing they were giving her opportunities other children could only dream of. Photoshoots replaced school lessons, rehearsals replaced playdates, and travel schedules replaced the quiet rhythms of a normal childhood. At the time, Aira accepted it because she did not know any other way of living. To her, being a doll was not a choice, but an identity placed upon her. She smiled when she was told to smile, dressed in costumes that made her appear more porcelain than human, and performed roles that left little space for her own personality to develop. But who was Aira beyond the lacy dresses, the bouncy curls, and the staged smiles? What were her interests beyond modeling and photo shoots? Did her friends like her for who she was inside, or were they just drawn to the allure of a child? Everyone felt the need to praise for something as casual, as undeserved as beauty. As the world wondered, so did Aira, but the answers to her questions didn't come easy. Teenage doubts. By her teenage years, the cracks in this image grew impossible to ignore. Aira longed to explore who she really was beyond the doll-like persona. She wanted to go to school without being recognized, to spend time with peers without being compared to her childhood photos, to live without being defined by her appearance. But the past clung tightly to her. Every time she tried to step away, the public and even her family reminded her of the fame she once held. For many, she was frozen in time, forever remembered as the little girl who looked like a doll. Was it a tragedy? Probably not in the usual sense of the word. But for the girl who was used to being stopped and praised every time she stepped outside her house, turning invisible was not only unexpected, it was painful. The same people who once showered her with compliments now barely acknowledged her in the streets. Had they ever cared about her as a person, Aira wondered, or did they only care for her when she was relevant? This burden began to weigh heavily on her sense of self. Aira often felt she was living in two worlds. One was the world of her childhood, filled with applause and flashing cameras, where her worth was measured by her looks. The other was the reality she now faced, where she struggled to establish herself as a person with thoughts, dreams, and goals beyond beauty. Reconciling the two seemed impossible, and this inner conflict left her feeling lost. Depression quietly crept into her life during this period. It was not the dramatic collapse that tabloids often write about, but rather a quiet, persistent sadness. She felt unseen, as though the world had moved on while leaving her trapped in the memory of who she once was. She began questioning whether she had ever been truly known at all. Was she ever Aira, or was she always just the doll? In response, she started to distance herself from her past. Old modeling photos disappeared from her online presence, and she grew reluctant to discuss her childhood career. Friends noticed her guarded nature whenever the subject of her early fame arose. She wanted to erase the doll persona, not because she hated it, but because it felt like a mask she had been forced to wear for too long. Removing it was the only way she could begin to discover who she really was. This realization was both painful and liberating. Painful, because it meant acknowledging that much of her childhood had been shaped by expectations that were never truly hers. Liberating, because for the first time, she considered building a future defined not by her appearance but by her choices. Her journey into adolescence marked the beginning of this search for identity. No longer content to live under the shadow of her past, Aira slowly began to question what she wanted for herself. Though the answers were not immediate, the very act of asking showed that she was finally stepping out from behind the porcelain mask. Parents, public opinion, and regret. Behind Aira's carefully staged childhood was a family dynamic that grew increasingly complicated with time. Her parents had been the driving force behind her modeling career, the ones who signed contracts, arranged photoshoots, and encouraged her to embrace the doll-like image that brought her fame. For them, it may have felt like advocacy. They wanted the best for their daughter, believing her looks could open doors to opportunities most families could never imagine. As the years unfolded, that belief began to look more like control. Public opinion was quick to cast judgment. Commentators referred to them as stage parents, the kind who lived through their children's success, rather than allowing those children to live their own lives. For every article that praised Aira's angelic features, another questioned the role her parents played in putting her on display. Did they truly see her as their daughter, or as a product to be marketed? The criticism stung, but it also raised questions that lingered long after the cameras turned away. Aira herself grew more conflicted as she looked back on her childhood. At first, she accepted everything without question, because she had never known another way of life. Modeling was normal, and her parents were the ones she trusted most to guide her. Yet as she matured, she began to wonder if they had ever paused to consider what was being taken from her. School, friendships, privacy, even the freedom to simply be a child had been replaced by a life of constant performance. She found herself torn between gratitude and resentment. Gratitude because she understood her parents had invested time and effort into creating opportunities for her. Resentment because she realized those opportunities had come at the expense of her own growth. There were moments in her quiet reflections when she asked herself the haunting question, did they even love me? It was not a question born from bitterness, but from confusion. Love, she thought, was supposed to protect. Love was supposed to put a child's well-being first. But in her case, love often felt tangled with ambition and expectation. The weight of regret did not belong to Aira alone. Did her parents ever recognize the toll of what had been lost? Did they see the sadness in her eyes when the modeling ended? Or were they too deeply caught in a cultural storm that celebrated appearances and fame above all else? Within the family, these questions were rarely addressed openly. Conversations about her career were clouded by nostalgia for the past, as if remembering the glamour of her early years could excuse the sacrifices she had been forced to make. But for Aira, those sacrifices were real and lasting. The cost of being a living doll was not measured in money or recognition, but in the quiet absence of moments she would never get back. Where is Aira now? Today, Aira Marie Brown lives far from the bright lights that once defined her childhood. The little girl who was once photographed in frilly dresses and praised for her doll-like beauty has grown into a young woman who values privacy above all else. She has carefully distanced herself from the image that once made her famous. Old photographs have disappeared from her accounts, and she rarely speaks about her modeling years. For Aira, the silence is not about shame, but about healing. She no longer wishes to be remembered as a novelty. She wants to be seen as a person. Though she rarely gives interviews, those who have followed her story note that she has turned toward education and personal growth. Instead of focusing on the expectations of others, she now focuses on creating a life that reflects her own choices. Friends say she has explored writing and other creative outlets, ways to express herself that are not bound to her appearance. She has begun to build an identity separate from her childhood fame, though the process has not been easy. Her relationship with her past remains complicated. There are days when she looks back with appreciation, acknowledging that her experiences gave her unique opportunities and allowed her to see the world at a young age. Yet there are also days when she reflects with sorrow, recognizing how much of her childhood was shaped by adult expectations rather than her own desires. For Aira, moving forward means finding peace with both realities, without letting either one control her future. Public interest in her has faded, though every so often old photographs resurface online. Comments from strangers still remind her of the doll-like image that once defined her. Some are nostalgic, others critical, and many are simply curious about what became of the child who looked like no other. Aira, however, has chosen not to engage with these conversations. Her focus is on the present, not on the memory of who she used to be. Her story serves as a quiet reminder of the cost of early fame. While the world once adored her for her beauty, that adoration came with expectations she could not sustain. In the end, she learned that identity built only on appearance is fragile and fleeting. What remains is the person she has chosen to become, one who is no longer measured by a porcelain face, but by her resilience and determination to live on her own terms. Do you think Aira should be more appreciative of her past opportunities, or is her reaction justified? What do you think of child modeling as an industry? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.